If you've ever been to this before, you know that Chad and I, we choke it back almost the entire time we're talking. So, my name is Dan, and one of my primary responsibilities for Urban Homeworks is to work with our low-income families in rental housing. I'm in my 6th year in this position, and I have the privilege of supporting 36 families in rental housing in St. Paul, North Minneapolis, and South Minneapolis. We currently have 36 units of rental housing for low-income families. These families have come to us primarily through referrals from agencies like People Incorporated, Elam Transitional, Episcopal Community Services, Our Savior's Housing, and Lutheran Social Services, just to name a few. Of those 36 units, 20 are subsidized through generous gifts from 2 large churches, and some of you here who have participated in our 100 Gives 100 campaign. For those of you interested in percentages, our family rental vacancy is 0.75%. We have 1 unit open, and I just got a phone call today that we'll fill that on Friday. And our vacancy has been under 5% consistently for the last year. My wife said, I don't really care about that number, but some of you might. Currently, we have 100 men, women, and children in our rental housing program. In our 13-year history, we've shared life with 386 family members. Our longest resident has been in housing with us for almost 8 years. And I just signed a lease on Monday with our newest resident. She's been in housing with her 2 boys for 3 days. We keep track of these kind of metrics because the length of someone's stay is one way to indicate their overall stability. One of our goals for families in our rental housing program is for them to experience long-term stability that will lay the groundwork for them to focus their energy on being better parents, employees, and members of the community. About a year ago, I was reflecting on the number of days a particular tenant had been with us. I sat down to write a journal entry entitled, Are 1,668 Days Enough? I was pondering that question because one of our family tenants had just moved out after spending 4.5 years with us. And I'd like to share a little bit of the background of that so that you can understand the struggle that I have with this question about 1,668 days. Jill and I met at a duplex in North Minneapolis just as the renovation was being completed on that house. She was a 24-year-old mother of 3 children with an 8-year-old daughter and 2 boys aged 2 and 3. She had lost custody of her kids and needed to secure housing before Child Protection would return them to her. We moved Jill in when the house was completed, and I began to understand some of why she had lost custody of her kids. She was verbally and physically rough on her children. The first year she lived in housing with Urban Homeworks, there were 28 calls for service to the Minneapolis Police Department. The calls for service included domestic disturbance, unwanted guests, and discharging of a firearm. And Jill was not exactly receptive to my intervention attempts with her. She used strong words to express her dislike for my involvement in her business. I did things like I suggested that she not fight with her daughter's friends. I encouraged her not to invite certain people to her apartment because they were the ones who seemed to attract the police. And I gave her an ultimatum. I said if she wanted to continue to live in housing with Urban Homeworks, she could not be responsible for any more calls to the police department. She quit talking to me for about 3 weeks, and as I monitored her housing and the calls for service, 1 week turned into 2, and then a month, and at the end of a year, there was 1 call to the police department. Throughout Jill's stay with Urban Homeworks, her daughter was paired up with one of our urban neighbors through a mentorship program. And although she was initially distrustful of urban neighbors, she came to know that they cared about her and her family. She experienced a graceful landlord that was not dissuaded when she called me every name in the book. She still experienced some challenges in parenting, but over time she found a more tender side of herself and found her children responding to her in a new way. So I sat down to wrestle with this question, is 1,668 days enough? Did Jill spend enough time with the urban neighbors for it to have a lasting impression on her? Would the trust that she had developed in me translate to another landlord? Would someone else understand the way that I had come understand her the way that I had come to, and overlook her sometimes harsh exterior? Would the progress that she experienced in the last 4 years begin to erode because she was no longer in the supportive environment of Urban Homeworks? And I left that journal entry a year ago, just as I do here today. I have questions and I don't have answers. And as I've thought about it since, I realize that maybe I'm asking the wrong question. Are 1,668 days enough for Jill or me? Did I observe enough about Jill and her family and her circumstances to have it make a lasting impression on me? Will the challenges and changes that I experienced in our time together stay with me when I need them most? 1,668 days with Jill, learning new ways to show tenderness to her children. 307 days with Sherelle, fleeing a 12-year abusive relationship. 136 days with Michael, battling the demons of drug addiction. And most recently, 3 days with Sharon, moving into housing after 3 months in 3 different shelters. How many days does it take to transform a person from despair to hope? Are 1,668 days enough? I don't know. And neither do you. And neither do they. Does Jill have a better relationship with her children? Yep, she does. Has her case been closed with child protection? Yes, it has. Does she have a better grip on her anger? Yes. Does she still get together with the urban neighbors? Yes. Has she had any more calls for service from the police department? I don't know. She doesn't live with us. Perhaps the mayor can help me find that out. So what happened to me in 1,668 days? The day that Jill moved in, I believed the best about her. When she called me names and yelled at me, I wanted more for her. When she stopped talking to me for 3 weeks, I prayed for her. One person's hope is contagious. And what I learned in my time with Jill is to keep believing, wanting, praying, and hoping for people even when it's hard. Jill kept giving me these glimpses of change that made me want to hope for her. I stopped by to see Jill in her new apartment recently for her birthday. I got big hugs from her and all the kids. We were catching up on life and talking about frustrations that she had with her current landlord. We shared a laugh out loud as we reminisced about some of the conflict that she and I had shared. She told me about how the urban neighbors still come by to visit her. And as we were wrapping up our visit, I asked her if she wanted to come speak at a luncheon that we hold every fall. That's this one. And she said no. But she did say, I miss living with Urban Homeworks. There's something really different about that place. So even though Jill is not living in our housing, she is still a part of our community. There's 2 things that I'd like you to glean from what I've shared with you today. First, I want to thank you for your support of Urban Homeworks. You enable me to do a job that I love. And second, whether you're a person running our country or our city, a company, a classroom, or a household, hope is contagious. Believe the best about people, and you might just bring it out.